Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we are going to get into, we're going to dive really deep into just one single word, salat.
Right.
And for most people, that word, it just instantly means prayer, right? Or the ritual, namaz. But our mission today is to show you why that translation might be, well, the biggest intellectual shortcut there is, really. It takes this huge multidimensional concept and just sort of traps it.
That's exactly the mission. We are cracking open sources that argue Salat is, it's an intellectual and a functional framework.
An umbrella concept.
An umbrella concept, exactly. It covers so much more than just bowing and prostrating. If we really strip away all the cultural layers and just look for its basic function, the most important nugget we find is that Salat means duty and responsibility.
Duty and responsibility.
It's the total commitment to a moral and ethical system.
Okay, let's unpack that duty. But the sources, they make a really crucial point right at the start.
They do.
They say before you can even define the action of salat, you have to understand the right kind of intellectual effort that's required by belief itself. It's not passive.
Absolutely. The material draws this really vital distinction with the concept of reason, or akul.
Right.
It's often just translated as the ability to think. But the sources suggest akul is, well, it's much more active. It's the thought process itself when you use it correctly. It's the deep critical thinking that actually leads you toward truth.
So it's not enough to just have a brain. You have to actively use it in a certain way.
Exactly. And this is completely foundational to how faith, or iman, is understood. True iman has to be based on verification, on investigation, on knowledge.
What the scholars call tahqiq.
Yes, tahqiq. This is the faith of the researcher. The enlightened person who's actually looked at the evidence.
That's a challenging definition. I mean, it suggests faith isn't some passive gift you receive, but it's an active intellectual struggle.
It is. And it immediately stands in contrast to the other concept, taqlid.
Which is blind following.
Blind following. Think about this analogy the sources use. Taqlid is like taking an ancestral necklace, the gardeshlik, and just putting it on because your parents wore it. You never question its value, its meaning, or if that belief even fits you.
That's a powerful image. It basically says unverified faith is just. It's a cultural accessory.
It can be.
But wait, if true faith requires this tahqiq, this investigation, doesn't that sort of exclude people who don't have access to, a formal education or deep textual analysis?
That's a great question. But the sources argue that the capacity for aql, for reason, is universal. It's in all of us. Tahqiq is less about having academic degrees and more about a conscious, sincere effort.
Okay.
And the connection is made really clear when the sources explain why humanity was made a deputy, a life on Earth. That entire status is based on our capacity for judgment, for thought, for moral choice. Our reason is what qualifies us for the duty.
So the duty requires this intellectual vigor. Okay, let's do it. Let's jump into the roots of the word salah itself. Because this is where it gets really interesting.
It really does.
The literal etymology from classical Arabic dictionaries, it has almost nothing to do with what we picture when we hear prayer.
We have to move past the spiritual for a moment and look at the physical, the mechanical. Linguistically, salat is related to anatomy.
Anatomy.
Yeah, it can refer to the middle of the back, specifically the hip or rump area of a four-legged animal. It's also related to the word sala, which is defined as the last, most durable bone of the tailbone, the last part to decay.
Wait, so we're talking about the part of the body for propulsion, lower spine endurance. That is so far from the meditative image we all have.
It's extremely visceral. It indicates physical exertion, focus. And this physical nature, it translates directly into concepts of action and competition and intensity.
Okay, like what?
For example, the term salt can refer to a polished, sharp, influential sword, something that cuts deep and, does its duty effectively. Another related term, insalat, means moving or running faster than others, surpassing them, an intense competitive sprint.
So this is a word built on struggle, on striving.
It absolutely is. And the most compelling evidence for this, the nugget that really changes everything, is how salat is used in horse racing.
Okay, tell us about the Muzali. I think this image is the one that's really going to stick with people.
So for you listening, try to picture a high-stakes desert horse race. The horse in the lead, the front runner, is called the muqaddam.
Okay.
The Muzali is the specific term used for the second horse in that race. This is the horse running with such dedicated intensity following the leader that its head is right near the leader's hip, its rump.
So the Muzali isn't the winner.
No.
It's the one putting in the most disciplined, relentless effort to just stay in the race, to keep up.
Precisely. The concept embedded in Salat isn't about leading. It's about intense, dedicated following. It's about participation and active engagement in a vigorous, focused struggle. If you are Musalli, you are pushing yourself to the absolute limit.
It fundamentally redefines Salat as active participation in this divine struggle.
It does.
That is a total game changer. So if Salat is this intense effort, this dedicated following, how do we see that in practice? Like when we look at secondary sources, like the Hadith collections.
Well, when we look at how Salat is used in the Hadith, especially in analyses by scholars like Kahih Krop, we see a much wider field of meaning. Yes, it often means the ritual prayer.
Of course.
But it's also used just like dua, which is supplication or rahmat, blessing, or even magfired, forgiveness. They're all pieces of this intensive interaction.
But the biggest connection to this idea of duty has to be its use to mean support and help.
Absolutely. Active support and assistance. There's this great example where people brought charity to the Prophet, and afterwards the Prophet offered a form of salat for the family of one of the donors, Abdullah bin Abi Aufa.
And that salat wasn't a ritual.
No, it wasn't a ritual prayer. It was interpreted as the Prophet giving them a blessing or support or active help in their community. Salat is something you actively give to others to sustain them.
So that physical effort we talked about, that striving of the Muzali horse, that connects directly to social action.
Exactly.
So what are some of the daily activities that the sources actually define as being forms of salat? This is where it really moves out of the mosque.
The list is huge. It reflects a total commitment to an ethical life. Salat is defined as commanding the good and forbidding the evil, removing an obstacle from the road, lifting a weak person's burden, being good to your neighbors.
Wow.
And the main takeaway from the hadith is just astounding. It says, every step of yours towards the mosque is salat. But then even more radically, it says, every righteous deed of a believer is salat.
It just transforms the entire system. It goes from being this inward-facing devotion to an outward-facing responsibility.
Yeah.
So you're performing your salat every time you engage in your ethical duty.
And that is why the definition of salat as duty and responsibility is really the only umbrella that fits. So when we move to the Quran itself, this social imperative it's undeniable. When the Quran commands believers to establish salat, to put this striving into practice, it's almost never listed by itself. What's his perpetual twin?
It's financial responsibility.
Exactly. The intense effort of salat is always linked to zakat or infaq, giving the purifying financial dues. If you look at a verse like Baqarah 277, establishing salat and giving zakat are inseparable.
One is the socioeconomic continuation of the other.
It has to be. The striving of that Muzali horse can't just be a spiritual focus.
Yeah.
It has to show up as tangible support for the community.
Which makes the entire purpose of the system about improving life on Earth, Allahun fillers.
Precisely. Baqarah 83 is a perfect example. It links salat and zakat to this whole list of duties. Worshipping only God, being good to parents, orphans, the needy, speaking kind words. It's effort in every dimension of life.
And it also involves endurance, right? I remember one of the sources stressing perseverance.
That's Baqarah 177. It lists salat right alongside true belief, keeping your promises, and persevering resisting the saberdendlerin in hardship, in illness, in war. Salat isn't just for when life is easy. It's the total effort you need to maintain your moral commitment when the world is pushing back.
Spiritual, financial, social, and physical endurance.
All of it. There was a really remarkable reinterpretation of that famous verse, Asab 56, about supporting the Prophet. It completely shifts the meaning from a passive blessing to an active duty. Can we walk through that one?
Yeah, that's a big one. So traditionally, that verse is understood to mean that Allah and the angels send blessings, or salawat, on the Prophet.
Right.
But if we stick with this active supporting meaning of salah, the whole interpretation changes.
The material argues that what it's really saying is that Allah and his powers support the Prophet.
So the command to believers isn't just to recite blessings.
No. It's command to similarly support him and his message on a yardum sholan, and to surrender completely to that message, teslima. It becomes a call to organizational and moral support.
So establishing salat means establishing a network of support for the community, for the truth, for the messenger himself.
It is participation in the struggle. And to really cement this idea, this contrast between active engagement and turning away, we can look at a brilliant literary device in Surah Qiyamah, verses 31 and 32. It's called Lef Nashir.
Okay, for anyone listening who might not know this one, explain Lef Nashir. It's a kind of literary technique, right, where you You wrap two ideas together and then unwrap their opposites in the next line.
That's exactly it. It's a very precise pairing
Yeah.
to create contrast. So the verse says, Fela Sadaka Wasala, which means he did not verify or affirm the truth, and he did not sala.
Okay.
The next line gives the opposite, Walaikin Kazaba Watawala. But he lied or denied the truth, and he turned away or separated himself.
Okay, so let's unwrap it. If Sadaka verifying the truth is the opposite of Kazaba, lying,
Then the action of Sala has to be the opposite of Tawala.
and Tawala means turning away from the struggle, separating
Unthought,
yourself.
withdrawing.
Which means Sala, the root of Salat, must mean the opposite. Joining, participating, engaging, and actively standing with the truth.
It is the definitive textual proof. Salat is a concept of active involvement. And this verse, being in an early Meccan surah focused on moral struggle, it just confirms the core concept wasn't about a private ritual. It was about public, dedicated engagement.
So if we put everything together, from the striving horse to the social welfare to this literary opposition of turning away, we end up right back where we started, that umbrella concept.
The conclusion is that Salat is the umbrella term for all necessary righteous actions. It's all good deeds, ameli sali, the striving of jihad, commanding good, piety, or taqwa. It's the total consciousness of duty and responsibility. The sources argue it's basically synonymous with the concept of din itself, the entire system.
And that synthesis, it helps us make that crucial distinction that started this whole deep dive. If Salat is the entire system, what is the daily ritual we call namaz?
The sources contend that namaz is the prescribed daily ritualistic worship. It is a necessary and very important part of Salat.
A part of it, not the whole thing.
Exactly. Salat is the huge network that includes that ritual, just as it includes lifting someone's burden or providing financial support. The issue, they argue, is that traditional religious culture, the human-created jurisprudence, often prioritize the visible, repeatable ritual over the expansive, difficult, and constant duty. And in doing so, it just shrank the massive scope of the Quranic concept.
This deep dive really gives you the tools to look at the source material with a profound new lens. To see Salat not as something you do 5 times a day, but as something you live every single moment, a total social, intellectual, and moral struggle.
And that duty, it extends far beyond just human society. Recall that verse in Nur 41 which says, the birds flying in ranks know their Salat and Tasbih. So if Salat is the foundational duty assigned to all existence, human, animal, cosmic, how does understanding your own fundamental relentless duty change the way you see your daily strivings? Knowing that every creature, from the birds in the sky to the very last bone that holds you up, is fulfilling its own form of Salat. That's something to mull over as you continue your own investigation.